What's up guys, my name is Zero Heroes and welcome back to more Gatesville. Now today we are going to be looking at probably, if not the most controversial, but for me personally, the most disliked doctrine, American doctrine option in my opinion, and this is for the mid-war doctrine, not for the earlier or late. This is for mid, because I feel like the mid-war is quite an underrated, but so is the early war kind of doctrine. So this is my opinion on why I think this is most controversial, but for me the most kind of unfair, disliked kind of doctrine for me in the mid-war. So if you do kind of like these kind of debates kind of videos on my review on these type of doctrines, make sure you stay tuned more to the channel, subscribe if you're new, hit that like, comment and subscribe and all that nonsense. And on that, let's just get straight into it. So why do I think that this is, if not the most controversial, most kind of underrated, most whatever it is, doctrine in the game? Well, first of all, let's talk about, I think that it is quite specifically for defense. This is a defense doctrine, and the reason you can tell it's defense is because most of, if not all of, the special units here are artillery or AT guns or some sort of AT gun on a mobile vehicle, which you can see for these two vehicles here, or if it's a mortar. So I feel like there's not a lot of variety for this doctrine, as in with other doctrines such as, I know besides all round, but like irregular or offensive, you actually get different types of units. Like you get planes, you get actually tanks, you get special units, you get, again, it's some artillery, where this is purely on all artillery, which I get because it is a defensive doctrine, and I completely get that. But I feel like there could be maybe some sort of special unit for maybe defensive units, such as maybe a unit, a squad, maybe for defensive, or maybe a tank that could be a defensive unit. So I feel like this is quite annoying kind of doctrine to play with, especially if you're, it is very, very good for defensive, and I see why, because there's a lot of defensive weapons, which makes it sense, which basically is why it's called defensive doctrine. But for me, I feel like there could be a lot more options for this. But let's have a look through these units, these vehicles, and I'll let you know why I think this is still probably, if not, you know, it could be better doctrine for the American mid-war defense doctrine, if that makes sense. So first of all, let's have a look at the artillery. At the back here, you have two very, very heavy, an 8-inch hounds, I can't speak today, an 8-inch howitzer, and also a 155mm gun M1A1 Long Tom, and also you have a 90mm gun M1A1. Now these are very, very good for very long range. I think these are one of, if not the longest type of artillery ranges that you can get. I think it's about 500 meters, and I've put these guns all the way up to their max kind of level, which is about, or whatever the map level is, which is about 400, because this map is the airfield. So this artillery can actually stretch all the way across kind of the pond. That's how kind of how big we're talking here. And this 90mm gun can actually really pack a punch, because it is 90mm, and also because, you know, even though it doesn't have a lot of defensive armor, which means the crew can be killed easily, you can put, and also you can't put a sandbag on it, so it does make it quite an easy target to kill the units. You know, you could probably use a tank, get it HE, and then it'll be dead. But that is even if before this thing will spot you first, which can be very deadly, because it is a 90mm gun. This thing will blast you into next week if you have some sort of light tank weapon, such as a Panzer III, maybe a T-34, or even if you are using kind of allied vehicles such as an M4 Sherman, it will blast you into possibly next summer even. So it is vulnerable, but still very good. But I do think that this is, again, there's not many options. You can't really use this for offensive, which I do get because it is a defensive doctrine, but there could just be maybe some different units that could be added in instead of these. Maybe the 155mm gun and the 80 silencer, but I don't think you really need a 90mm kind of defensive weapon, as because it is kind of open and weak. But because this is a fast rate fire type of gun, it is very useful. But just because of how big and open it is, it probably will get detected very easily, and therefore I think it is kind of a waste of a unit in the defensive doctrine, whereas they could have maybe put a defensive maybe unit, you know, squad in, or tank, which could have maybe been better. Next, we're going to be moving on to the self-propelled howitzers. One is 105mm and the other is a 75mm. Now, both I think these vehicles are, again, they're pretty weak. They do only have the hull armor of a 6.5, so they're probably only best against even like rifle guns and at best maybe some mortar shells, but on that it cannot take any kind of AT gun shells. Even the AT guns as light as they come, maybe a 2.5cm or 3.5cm AT gun, if there's such a thing as that is in the German or Finnish army, then it still can pierce through it, or a 4.5cm. These things can still easily get pierced, and it just makes it a waste. But the good thing about this is that because it does also have some defensive options on the back, which means it does have, I think, 50 cals, I believe, 50 cal on the back of each of them, which means if any troops do sneak up round the back, then it can defend itself from the sides. But because this thing can only turn it about 45 degrees to the right and to the left, it cannot defend itself from the sides. That means it is vulnerable from infantry, shooting from coming in from the side, maybe throwing in a grenade or a Molotov or anti-tank grenade, then it is vulnerable from the sides. But from the rear and from the front, it is very powerful. But these guns are nothing to be laughed at. They are so very powerful. They could probably knock it against Panzer IIs, possibly even Panzer IIIs, because they are quite high caliber guns, because they are howitzers. They do have that fast rate of fire, which does make it a pain in the ass, but also very good at killing infantry AT guns. But because they are big and mobile, they are very easily spotted, and therefore not a very good idea. And putting two of them in, again, I feel like it's such a waste, because you could put maybe a tank in, maybe like a defensive tank, maybe like a Wolverine or something, or some sort of tank destroyer, which could have been better because that has armor. And I know tank destroyers, American tank destroyers, don't have some of the best armor, but it still would use it as maybe kind of like as a, maybe you can see like there's a 3-inch GMC, but I maybe putting like a Wolverine or some sort of special tank destroyer in this section here, which would make it a lot better. But this is the mid-war, so I don't think the Wolverines were in, I think they were in the late war kind of doctrine section, so that still does make sense. Going on to kind of now your AT guns, your AA guns. One is your 3-inch gun, M5 M1 carriage, and also you have your AA 40mm automatic gun, which is good against the AA, and I can see why it is defensive. You could actually possibly use these two vehicles for offensive. If you are doing kind of an offensive battle, then you could. But then again, they are slow moving, and it takes a while to get them to the battlefield, so they're not that good. Again, better for defensive positions. That's why it's in the defensive doctrine. But again, you could have maybe some mobile, maybe AT guns or some mobile infantry, which could replace this for maybe defensive infantry in this doctrine, which could make it a lot better. But I do see why, because I would recommend at least one or two just maybe AT guns in this defensive doctrine, which they do have, as well as an AA. So I do kind of agree with that. Next is kind of your mortar and kind of supply truck. So first you have a 4.2-inch mortar. You do have an engineer truck, and you also do just a normal M3 kind of hat track. There's nothing special about the M3 half track besides that, it can carry infantry as a 50 cal on the top, and that's about it, and it can just transport troops easier. But I think this is a complete waste of space. Actually, I think this was actually part of carrying a tow truck. I think this was actually carrying possibly one of the kind of big guns here, so I think this actually doesn't count. I just realized that it's not part of the actual kind of selection here of the doctrines here, so I'm actually just going to move that out of the way. I thought this was part of it, but it's not. But if we are kind of moving on to these two, which is the mortar, I feel like this is actually quite essential, because mortars are very good defensive weapons, very good against, holding off attacks, especially against infantry and even lightly armored kind of open vehicles, such as, tank destroyers that do have an open hatch or open top, or even just kind of digging out infantry in trenches, and even other mortars as well, which could also be dangerous because they are fast rate of fire, these mortars, because they took maybe about every 2 to 3 seconds, but they are highly inaccurate, so you're never guaranteed to even hit the target exactly. It'll take maybe a few times for the mortar to kill the enemy for these troops to become, you know, veterans, you know, to go up in the ranks, because every time you get a kill in this game, the mortar becomes kind of, your troops become more better, you know, become like better ranked up, and kind of when the more kills they get, so they get more accurate and they get more, I think that's how it works anyway. If I'm not, then let me know in the comments down below. But I think this is still quite a good choice. I don't feel like this is a complete waste of a space in kind of the doctrine section here. And lastly, you do have the engineer truck. Okay, I feel like this is actually very essential for defensive, as you know, defenses you do need to set up kind of barbed wires, tank traps, trenches, kind of trenches for tanks as well, which you can build. And the fact is that you can resupply. So let's say you're engineers, so you have two engineers, one, as you can see, is driving and the other is on the gun mount here, as you can see, with a 50 cal on top, which is good for defending this truck so it doesn't blow up. But for the fact is, it does kind of have this orange circle, which means if your engineers do run out of kind of tank traps, they don't need to like manually go into the kind of the truck and kind of select what they want. You just go into this orange circle and the engineers will start resupplying on, you know, mines, anti-tank mines and all that, which will refill very, very quickly. And I feel like this is actually quite a crucial part, and I feel like it is a good addition to the doctrine, the defensive doctrine of the mid-war there. So there you go, guys. That is kind of my opinion on what I think about the controversial but kind of disliked, you know, doctrine, mid-war defensive American doctrine in this. I feel like there could be better units that could be used within this doctrine here, but I do understand it is mid-war, so they don't have the most advanced technology at the time. So I think the mid-war is about 1936 to 1938. If I'm not right, then let me know in the comments. But oh wait, 1930. Oh wait, the war started in 19. Oh my god, I'm an idiot. The war started later on, I think. Oh no, I'm completely messing up when the war started. This is like basic history knowledge, and I'm completely messing up. I can't even remember when the war started. So anyway, guys, I've completely flustered up of when the history starts. So that's completely embarrassing for me. So thank you for pointing that out. You guys kind of have a wee debate down in the comments. If you disagree, then that's okay. Then let me know what you would, if you like this kind of, if you like this, you know, this doctrine with these units, or do you kind of prefer the options that I gave with some, you know, defensive tanks, maybe, you know, tank destroyers, or would you prefer kind of defensive infantry that can actually, you know, be used in a defensive way? But other than that, guys, that is really it for this episode. If you did like it, make sure you leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and again, let me know your thoughts on the mid-war defensive doctrine for the Americans. Other than that, guys, that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and our support, and I will see you in the next video. See you later, and goodbye.